One of my favorite ways to use iRespond is in the student paste mode. Generally what I'll do after I select student paste is I will give my students a copy of a quiz or a pretest or a test, and it will be set up much like the one that you see on the screen now. This is an example of the quadrilaterals quiz that I've talked about in several of these modules. And so you can see all of these are multiple choice questions, A through D. You can also see that over here there's a little extra if you finish early kind of brain teaser. So all of my students would have this quiz. I do typically allow them to write on these quizzes because what I want them to do is to answer all of the questions before they buzz anything into their remotes. So after I pass these out, then I go back to my computer and I start this iRespond session. Obviously I would want to give this to my math class, so when I go to the classes box I'm going to choose my math class, which I set up on my own, and as you can see when I set it up I only put in my students' first names just to save a little bit of time. Since I want to give them the quadrilateral quiz, you'll notice that it is in here, but when I set it up, I actually set it up in a very simple way. So I'm going to start a new test. Remember that this green pencil on the piece of paper is going to start a new test for you. The name of this test is going to be Sample Quadrilaterals Test. And this time, instead of selecting Test Bank, where I can actually create the questions as well as the key, this time I'm just going to create the key. And so instead of clicking on Test Bank, I'm going to click on Test Key. You'll see that this pops up. I can choose how many multiple choice questions I want, how many responses are going to be available, how many multiple response questions are going to be available on the quiz, and the number of responses to those, and the number of fill-in questions. Since that quadrilaterals quiz only had multiple choice questions, and there were 9 of them, I'm going to change that number to 9. I'm going to leave this as 4 choices because it was A, B, C, D. And now I'm going to click OK. I don't have any multiple response questions, and I don't have any fill-in questions. So now I just simply look at the quiz. I determine what the answers are. Let's say number 1 is C, number 2 is A, number 3 is B, number 4 is A, number 5 is C, number 6 is D, number 7 is D, number 8 is B, and number 9 is B. That quickly I've set up the key for this test. I click OK. It takes just a second for it to pop in. And you'll see that it is now in my test bank. It already has a check mark next to it saying that's the one that I've selected. I go ahead and click my remotes and I click Start. It does ask me if I want to save the changes, and I just go ahead and say yes. And now I just follow the process that I would normally follow. Once the students have completed the quiz on paper, then they can turn on their remotes and log in and go ahead and enter in all their answers. As I mentioned, since some students will finish earlier than others, I do always try to put a couple of brain teasers that they can work on while they wait for other people to finish. And it's really just that easy to use the test key method of building a test bank. One of the drawbacks to using the test key is that your questions have to be on the test in this order. You have to have all of your multiple choice questions first, all of your multiple response questions next, and all of your fill-in questions last. Since there are some quizzes and tests that I've created that aren't set up in that way, there are times when I have to go in and create a test key in a different way. And so I'm going to click Cancel here. Again, we're going to be looking at a student paste test, and so the students will have a copy of the test in front of them. There will be nothing displayed on the screen. They'll simply be looking at their remotes and their test, and they'll be moving through it at their own pace without having to wait for anybody else in the class. Now, I do want to create a new test, and so again I go to the test banks box, I click on the green pencil on the piece of paper, new test bank, and I'm going to call this sample 2. This time, since my test is not going to be set up in the proper order, I'm going to click test bank. This takes just a little bit longer. Questions have to be added, and yes, of course I want to add those questions now. So it pulls up this box that we looked at before when we were creating an instructor paste test. I'm going to do the exact same thing, except this time I'm not going to bother typing in the questions or even the answers. So for instance, if I were to pull up this checkup quiz on, let's say, decimal multiplication. You can tell by looking at this quiz that it's not set up in the proper order to just go in and create the test key. For instance, this first one would be an open response, so would the second one. But number 3 is a multiple choice question, number 4 is a multiple choice question, but then again, number 5 is an open response question. And so, because they do not follow the same pattern in the test key, then I'm going to have to actually set up the test. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on back to iRespond. As I mentioned, the first one is a fill-in. Students just have to give me the answer. And so what I'm going to do is just put in the blank. If it's a fill-in, you have to include the blank. You don't have to include anything else. And since this is a fill-in, I'm going to click on A. There's only going to be one answer possible. Click on scored responses, and to be honest, I don't remember the answer to that problem, so I'm just going to say 1 5/10 is the answer. And I press OK, and now I've done number 1, number 2. I click next question. Again, this was a fill-in, so I have to remember to put in my line. Click on A. Let's pretend like the answer to this was 3 8/10. I click OK. I click next question. The next question was a multiple choice question. I'm not going to put anything in the question bar. I'm just going to click my 4 choices, and let's pretend like the correct answer was B. So I double click B so it turns into a green check mark. Next. Again, the next question was a multiple choice. It had 4 choices. Let's pretend the correct answer this time was A. I double click it so that it turns into a green check mark, and I continue going through like that. After I've done all of my questions, I just click Finished, and since I said I was going to put something here, it's requiring that I do. So, and now I click Finished because I've just entered my last question. And now you can see that if I tried to pull this up on the screen for students, they would see almost nothing. Number 1, they would see a line. Number 2, they would see a line. Number 3, 4, and 5, they would see absolutely nothing. That's because during this time, they're looking at their paper, at the quiz that I passed out, and so they're figuring out the answer to this problem and typing it into their remotes. So once I've created that, it is time to get this started. So I click Student Paste. I'm going to give this to my math class again. So I click Math Class. I go in and find my sample. It's typically already selected for me, but I'm going to go ahead and double click. I click my remotes, and again I can click Start. Now students are going to be able to log in, and as soon as all of my students have logged in, they'll be able to start logging in their answers as well.